Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We have got a fantastic speaker with us today, talking to us about what kids with autism wish that we knew. We have Armando Bernal. He, I just love doing webinars with him because he's so, you just got, you have such a way about you in talking
Thank
with
you.
people and being comfortable and just presenting the information in such a good way. And you have, of course, the insight that we don't. So we so appreciate you being here with us today, Armando. And
Thank you so much.
everybody who is joining us, thank you. Um, I want to let you know a few things before we get started. We are in webinar mode, and so that means we can't hear you or see you, but you can put any comments or questions that you have into the chat box, and I'll be able to monitor that and let Armando know whenever questions show up, so we can go into that. You can also put your comments. We love to make this an interactive experience. We do record all of our webinars and we put them on our YouTube channel after we're finished. So once this webinar is finished today, we will send all of you a copy of the webinar, like a link to the YouTube channel, plus all of the slides. So you'll be able to look back through those and get any information that you may have missed. Other than that, I think we're good to go. We are here for about an hour today. We can't see you, so I hope you have a drink and a snack and don't mind if I sip on my coffee while we go through all of this information. I am Michelle Morris with Consolidated Planning Group. Consolidated Planning Group, we like to go by CPG. We are a financial planning firm, first of all. We help families with comprehensive financial planning, retirement planning, life insurance, investments, all of that kind of stuff. But the owner of our company has two children who have special needs, and that's when she decided this is really difficult, and I should know all of this stuff because I'm a financial advisor. So let's find a way to make it easier for our clients to get through all of this. And that's why we decided to really work almost exclusively with families who have loved ones who have some kind of intellectual or developmental disability. So that's where the special needs planning side comes in. We present these webinars because we want to educate and advocate for you, to let you know what is available and what you should be doing to prepare for the future. We have over 30 years of experience with securities and insurance. We are fully licensed in those areas, but we are also members of the Special Needs Planning Academy, and we are nationally certified as Social Security advisors. So we really take this seriously, furthering our education and making sure that we are up to date on all the current legislation and rules of the road. So when families come to us for special needs planning, we're talking about, lifetime protection plans, protecting your income, protecting your family if you should happen to become disabled or pass away too early, or even if you live too long. My grandmother used to say she was worried that she was outliving her money. And that's a real issue. We talk about lifetime care plans for your loved ones. Who is going to take care of them? Where are they going to live? What if they can't be completely independent? What does that look like? There's transition planning options, like when they graduate from high school, and you don't necessarily want your loved one to just graduate to the couch. So what else is available? We help you find those great resources that are out there. Of course, we do ABLE accounts and life insurance and help you figure out things like your special needs trust by referring people to attorneys. And again, we're here to educate and advocate for you. There are over 263,000 financial advisors across the United States. And out of those 263,000 financial advisors, fewer than 200 of them, not 200,000, just 200 period, focus on special needs planning. So when you are talking to Consolidated Planning Group, you are in the right space. There's fewer than 0.1% of all of the financial advisors who really understand the nuances of working with families like yours. Just to a little more about planning and thinking about the future. Sometimes we get the question, when is the right time to start planning for the future? It's keeping me awake worrying about all this stuff, but I feel like maybe my child is too young. No, the answer is now. Now is the perfect time to start planning for your child's future. It doesn't matter if they're 6 months old or 6 years or 16 or older. We're not going to, criticize you or punish you for not doing things in the past, but right now you can get started. And there are always things you can do to plan for the future. Helping answer those questions early makes all the difference because you have more time to put things into place and to make small incremental changes that will have huge lasting effects on your financial life and your child's financial life. Think about what's going to happen after high school. There are vocational options, residential communities, and lots of educational options out there. Some of these things have wait lists, so you might want to consider touring early to see, what opportunity is right for your family, and then getting on those waiting lists just in case. And we always say, make careful consideration before you just assume that a sibling is going to want to step in as caretaker or that your child will want to be taken care of by their sibling. It goes both ways. And you want them to have a loving, fruitful relationship, not an obligatory or resentful one. So I am going to go ahead and turn this over to Armando. And again, I thank you all for taking the time to be here with us today, especially you, Armando, for presenting this information. I'm going to stop my share and allow you to go ahead and share your screen so that you can have control over your slides.
Fantastic. Thank you. Let me go
There
ahead
you
and do
go.
that. Yeah. Hello and welcome everybody. As I'm pulling out my presentation for each of you, I just want to say it's such a pleasure to be with each of you today. I'm really glad to see so many people that were willing to sign up for this and want to learn more about this kind of thing, right? So I think everybody is able to share able to see this now, so that's really great. And then let me confirm. Yeah, share computer sound. Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go through this. Not share, excuse me. Let me do slideshow. There we are.
Perfect.
As it loads.
Yeah, that's always the fun. There you go. We can see it perfectly now. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason why I'm able to speak on something like this, right, is the fact that just like what I was being told is that we wanted to try and provide a message to each one of you on what an individual with autism may be wanting to think. And oftentimes, up until recently, there were a lot of neurotypical individuals that were trying to provide this information, and they were just trying to do as much good as they possibly can. For myself, I am a board certified behavior analyst, but I'm also diagnosed with autism. I was diagnosed with autism at the age of 3, and doctors told my mother that I might as well learn sign language because I was never going to be able to speak. They told her that in a very cold manner and said, off you go. I have 100 people just like you. Best of luck for you and your son for the rest of your life. You'll probably have to take care of him. My mother did not take that well at all. Obviously, I don't know any parent that would. And eventually, though, she was able to overcome these feelings of frustration and concern and moved on to then finding out different ways to have myself be better taken care of, right? And in order to do that, we couldn't afford applied behavior analysis therapy. This was the 90s. We couldn't afford any kind of very expensive kind of therapies, but instead she went to the free public library, found books about autism, and then continued to speak with me and speak with my family to try and determine different interventions that could be very beneficial for me, right? As I was able to eventually test out of life skills, being able to go about my educational track, I did then become a special education teacher certified in the state of Texas. And then eventually became a board certified behavior analyst. Eventually, then a podcast host in 2020, where I was able to interview individuals on the spectrum throughout the nation at some points throughout the world to better determine ways to show parents that a diagnosis is what not makes a person, but rather what happens after the diagnosis is what does that for them, right? Now, with Consolidated Planning Group, as well as many other types of companies, I've been able to become a special education advocate to better support those in need. And then finally becoming the owner of the only autistic-owned ABA company, Applied Behavior Analysis Therapy Company in Houston, Texas. And I recently just found out from a friend of mine, her name is Marie Cerda, that it's herself and myself. We're the only autistic-owned company owners in Texas. So
Wow.
there are only two autistic owners for ABA therapy centers in the state of Texas, and Texas is rather large. So it is always a very interesting fact.
Thank you for doing that, and congratulations to you. That is fantastic.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So what we're going to go over today is a little table of contents that I listed out here. I'd like to go over communication and what that means regarding an individual's behavior. Then moving into the beauty of structure and how structure can then provide different opportunities for a child to de-escalate their feelings. And moving toward how this de-escalation has been presented in social media, which definitely plays a factor in how we view autism, how we view therapies that are being provided to autistic individuals, and then finally how to overall de-escalate these confrontations and maybe hope for a better future that we can work toward together. So communication through behavior, what does this mean? It's very important to understand that as a board certified behavior analyst, I teach the parents I work with that all behavior is communication. It may be inappropriate communication, but it is still communication nonetheless. And these inappropriate communication factors that I'm talking about, right, is hitting, kicking, biting, tantrums, aggression, self-injurious behavior. All of these have a purpose. And the reason that we can say that is that every action that an individual takes, including myself and everyone here in the audience and those listening, happen for one of four reasons, or maybe at times, maybe one or two at the same time, right? So they'll happen for either escape or attention, and I broke these down for each of us. So escape is the idea of trying to get out of something. So some kind of aversive situation. For an adult, it may be a spam call and you hit the hang up button. That could be something that we are trying to escape from. Attention can either be for wanting it either positively or negatively. And when I say that, the idea of a good job is the same thing for an individual that's seeking attention as a don't do that, put that down, don't throw that kind of situation, where we're still getting attention one way or the other. And in that scenario, it doesn't matter which way. The other two functions of behavior that we look at is tangible and sensory, where tangible means that they're trying to gain a tangible item, whereas sensory means that there is some kind of natural reinforcement present. It doesn't matter if anybody is talking to them, around them, if they're doing some kind of work. This is typical what we consider maybe that stereotypical term of like hand flapping or rocking back and forth, jumping up and down, things of that nature. Basically, that this behavior is going to occur even when nobody is watching. So this assumption of behavior comes into play where we're talking about behavior being either good or bad, right? So there is no such thing as a good behavior or no such thing as a bad behavior. Simply put, behavior is an action that somebody does. If we start trying to provide a label on what is good or bad, that is when we can start getting into subjectivity that doesn't help the child overall, right? Obviously, we can say that there is a difference between sitting down in an appropriate manner and then throwing a chair when it's inappropriate, right? These would be better suited to speak on as if they are socially appropriate behaviors or socially inappropriate behaviors, because good and bad can change throughout time. So it is better to then look at it in a social lens to better promote what would be more acceptable in society as of today, April 15th, right? In addition to this, the assumption then comes into play that we talk that all behavior is learned, that everything that we're doing has been taught in some form or fashion. Now, this is not to say that every parent here has taught their child how to throw a chair or do other things, right? What this is to say is that this child has seen this done at some point in time in their life, whether in a crowd, in the community, on television, around brother and sister, maybe a baby or a dog, it doesn't matter. They've seen certain behavior happen, they've seen that it works for them, and then therefore they are wanting to do it over and over again. Another idea that we have to remember too is that behaviors are observable. When we look at behaviors and we start to say, oh, well, he's doing X because he is so mad at me right now, right? That idea is very subjective, and it will then hinder our ability to better understand how to diminish this problem, right? An example that I give here is that if your child throws something at your television and it breaks, you're going to be very upset. However, I likely will not be very upset because it's not my television, right? So I can say that in order to explain that what is anger or frustration to you may not be the same thing as anger and frustration to me. And the same concept comes in charge with the behaviors that we're being presented, right? If we start saying that this child is mad and that's why he's throwing a tantrum, what is something that makes this child mad is going to be very subjective compared to what makes you mad. So it's better to look at it more externally and removing the million and one options that possibly could cause the behavior and say that the behavior is happening for one of four reasons: attention, sensory, escape, or tangible at that point of view. And then finally, we can say that behaviors are functional, predictable, and changeable. Something's going to either be gained or it's going to be lost. If we can look at the behavior and why our child is doing something, and one reason why I'm doing this is to show you that autistic individuals are not doing things out of a malicious nature, or they're not doing things out of an inappropriate, just to be funny kind of situation, but instead are seeking some form of function, attention, escape, whatever it may be. And moreover, that this behavior, this action that an autistic individual is doing, is again not to be malicious, but simply because they are communicating their wants and needs. It's just not in a socially appropriate way that we would deem acceptable in our society today. So an example here that I try to provide, because some parents I talk to is not, they're not really able to further understand what is being accepted here, right? So my scenario I use is water in Germany. So let's, for the sake of argument here, everyone here and everyone listening does not understand German. We're from the United States, we only speak English, and we go to Germany and we're asking for water or money or some kind of grocery item, right? And in this situation, we're asking for it in English. But in Germany, they are not accepting English as the way to get the item we are wanting. And instead, they are requesting that we provide the request in German. And then once we provide it in German, we are then able to get the item that we're asking for. In this case, it would be water. So in this situation, the idea of using English has been diminished and is now punishable because of the fact that we're not getting our water. And now the use of German is being reinforced in order to get the item that we're asking for. Whereas in the scenario, excuse me, it says scenario 1, but scenario 2 is where it's at. In scenario 2, we're in this country where the language is not understood, i.e. German, but even so, we speak in English and say, hey, can I have water? And they still provide us with the water. And it then reinforces the idea that we can use English to get what we're wanting, right? So why am I saying this? I'm saying this because if we substitute German with English and we substitute our English with a behavior, i.e. maybe aggression, self-injury, if we are allowing the child to aggress and still receiving the item that they're requesting, we are then reinforcing the idea that they can act in a certain way and still get this item that they're requesting. Whereas if we then act as scenario 1 and say, hey, that is not going to be acceptable, you need to use XYZ form of communication, then that teaches them that the aggression is no longer going to be acceptable to get the item that they're wanting, but instead they have to use some form of communication. Now, again, it doesn't need to be English. It can be picture cards. It can be another language. It can be phrases, signs, whatever it may be. The point of the matter being, though, is that this child now understands that there is a different, more socially appropriate way of communicating than there is for them to use their aggression to get what they're wanting. So that's just something to keep in mind as we continue on in this step forward, right? So what I want to show here is I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to show a new share of this video of a child tornado in a room. It's about a minute long, and I'll share my audio so you can hear it as well. I believe, oh, excuse me, it should be this one instead. Give me 1 second to exit this and it should be okay. Uh-oh. Excuse me 1 second, you guys. Oh, stop share. Sorry. I
There
couldn't
you
find the button.
go.
Yeah, technology's hard. Sorry about that, y'all.
No worries.
Okay, so let me go ahead and share my screen so then that way you guys can do that. But I hope that thus far everyone is still with me here.
Oh, absolutely. As a matter of fact, we've gained most of the people here since you've started.
Oh, fantastic. All right, so I'm sharing.
Y'all get up and move. Get out the class, everybody get out the class. Everybody get out the class. Hey, y'all come out. Yeah. Y'all go out. Dr. Simon is right there in Miss Wilson's class doing the observation. You want to grab her? You want to grab her? I'm trying to get all her kids out of the room. She started throwing stuff everywhere. Again. I just heard the commotion.
Right, excuse me 1 second, you guys. Very good. Okay, awesome. So let me share back the other screen here. But in that respect, right, as we continue on, and let me try and get back to the presentation at that point, we start to discuss that may seem familiar to some of you, unfortunately, when it comes to how a child may respond to the communication aspect here. Let me go ahead and share it again. So this child is demonstrating a tantrum-like behavior here, where we wanted to find a way to de-escalate this. But at this point in time, the intensity is so high that the odds are that that would not occur at this point. But what is important here is to understand, I don't know this child's diagnosis at all, right? It could be nothing, it could be autism, ADHD, whatever at this point. But what's significant here is to understand that this individual is displaying some action to communicate his wants and needs. In fact, at the very end of it, you can see that this child is saying the words move, move, get me out of here, this kind of situation, and therefore is expressing his wants and needs. In this way, he's wanting to escape, but possibly also attention. We don't really know. It's all going to be hypothesized here. But the idea here, though, is to understand that a child is trying to communicate the wants and needs. They may just be physically attempting to show that through the destruction of a room. Maybe the destruction of the room also demonstrates some kind of sensory relief for him, where he is wanting to de-escalate by doing things like that, right? An example here is, unfortunately, with some that may hit items or throw items when they're upset, that causes that same kind of familiarity with their trying to communicate what they're feeling in that moment. So, but there is a beauty of structure here, where we can start to understand that there are different things that can be done to prevent this from happening in the first place, right? As I had mentioned earlier, I won't go into more detail about it, but determining the function of a behavior, determining why a child is doing what they're doing is going to be very significant. But then moreover, having different kinds of antecedent interventions that could be used in order to then de-escalate this behavior before it even happens, right? The idea here is to understand precursors of what a child will do before it leads to that highly intense moment that we saw in that classroom, right? An example of this is to understand that a child isn't simply going to be in a fight or flight from 0 to 100 and be like, ah, right? And what they are going to do instead is maybe that they will start then saying, or maybe they'll move away from you, or maybe they'll try and do things that are telling you, hey, I don't want to be touched. Hey, I don't want to talk to you right now. All of these things. But when those key aspects are ignored, that's when we start to see that this child has already given that warning and we have heeded that, and we have not heeded that warning, and therefore this child has no choice, quote unquote, no choice, to then provide a more intense moment that they know will work to allow them to get their wants and needs accepted, right? So the antecedent is going to be very important here. Whereas the word assent, which may or may not be familiar to you, is a very newer idea that's being promoted in social media, with the idea of allowing the child to be able to choose what tasks and activities are completed. Now, I'm sure I will get some kind of pushback from a parent or a teacher that says, well, wait a minute now, this child isn't going to run my classroom, this child isn't going to run my house. I'm not going to let him do what he's wanting. Now, keep in mind, that is not what is being said here. What's being said, as we'll go into it further, is the idea that the child is able to make, as you'll see in the next portion on the bottom left, choices that can allow this child to still complete the task that you're asking him to, but maybe in a partnership type way where the child is able to determine the way that it needs to get done. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to accomplish here is just have the activity be completed. We don't necessarily care how it's being completed. And that's something that we'll go into further. And then finally, maintaining the safety of this child is going to be very significant. Whereas both external and internal safety is something that we can talk through regarding the child partnership. So as we continue forward here, right, we'll understand the difference between assent and dissent. Assent is where we are going to have the child, allow the child stay to be child-led. So an example of this is going to be, hey, let's go ahead and play Chutes and Ladders. Or in this situation, it was Candyland. Let's play Candyland. And the child says, well, I don't want Candyland. I want to play Chutes and Ladders. At the end of the day, does it really matter which one that we're going to play with, right? Or is it going to be more important that at least the child is starting to interact with others, the child is starting to learn that we can play board games, that we do have a social aspect that we need to follow through with. Those kind of things would be considered assent here, right? Being able to allow the child to go to the left when the parent wanted to go to the right. Are we still ending up in the same way, right? That's something to be significant. Now, keep in mind what I'm saying here is, again, not that this child is getting to choose everything that you're doing. Well, Dad, you need to wear the black shirt. You can't wear the blue shirt kind of situation. Nope. We can still set boundaries, right? But it's allowing assent to occur when we possibly can. Because at the end of the day, what the child is trying to accomplish here, they're trying to get some kind of autonomy. They're trying to get some kind of control when odds are they don't have really any control in their life currently, right? So it doesn't need to be a situation where it's a fight every single time. Rather, instead, it could be now more, hey, do you want to wear the blue shorts or the green shorts? You don't really care what shorts they're going to wear. You just care that they wear shorts. You can do something like that. Or in my situation that I talk to a lot of my parents is that you try and weigh out the options that benefit you further. So, hey, do you want to put your dish in the sink, or do you want to go mow the lawn? Well, quite frankly, I would probably pick the sink over the lawn because that is so much more work. But at the end of the day, it then provides a sense of control to that child to know, well, I made that choice, so I'm going to follow through with what is being asked of me at this moment here. We also have to understand that the child is just wanting to have control, and you can do that by allowing them to be a partner in that control, that they can start deciding what kind of moves they want to make, that they can decide what kind of actions that they would like to take, while still keeping this boundary in place. We're still trying to maintain that nutritional safety. We're trying to maintain their safety. You can't run across a crosswalk. You need to first look both ways. So an example of that would be, do you want to walk beside me, or do you want me to hold your hand while we take the crosswalk? So giving them that option, either way they're crossing the crosswalk, it just is a way of giving them a little bit more autonomy. Whereas the idea also where we need to stand firm, which is the idea of, well, I don't want to eat lunch, I want to have candy for lunch. That's something that is going to happen or possibly could happen. And we want to make sure this child understands that, I'm sorry, candy's just not going to be an option. However, you can decide first, do you want to eat broccoli or green beans? Hey, good job. Once you eat, thanks for making a choice. Once you eat your green beans, then we can go ahead and have candy afterwards. And having that kind of mentality is going to be very significant. Whereas the opposite, though, is what may be typical for traditional type settings, right? Both for a clinical setting, but also maybe a parental setting, as the idea of dissent is where we're refusing to accept the child's refusal. So if a child is like, no, I want Chutes and Ladders, not Candyland, we're like, too bad, we're going to have Candyland. Like that kind of situation, right? Or making this child eat vegetables until the parent says stop. Not when they're wanting, but when the parent is making them say stop. So again, they're losing that control. This is what causes frustration, anger, aggression, things like that. And we want to really try to avoid this at all costs, because again, this is where things get out of hand. This is when we start seeing children start to throw a room, tornado a room, destroy it, have the child isolated, things of that nature. And really, as we'll get into it further, the idea of isolating this child and exiting a room, I understand, is for the safety of the children that are being a part of it. But our better option, because it's possible that that child is simply tornadoing the room because they do want to be left alone, and we just gave them what they're wanting, it would be better to determine the cause, the root cause of this behavior, and then move forward with finding an alternative, whether that be assent, choice making, things that we'll get into here. So I just put a little typical thing that everyone may know about for the matrix, the red pill or the blue pill. So choice making can be very, very easy. It doesn't need to be a complicated situation that you need a day or a week ahead of time to plan. It could simply be something in the moment where we choose an activity and we pick two choices. You want to write with a pen, or do you want to write with a pencil? Do you want to write option A or option B? For you, again, it doesn't really matter which way they write about it. It just matters, did they write? Even if it's like, well, they can only write with pen in the classroom, that's expected. Okay, do you want to write with a black pen or a blue pen? It's giving them a choice without necessarily having to make a big deal out of it. Because if we're like, hey, you can't do this anymore, sorry, that is going to get them to feel as if really the entire world is ending. We want to make sure that we communicate those kind of appropriate needs, right? So again, autistic individuals, when we think about what they want to know, is that nothing is being said maliciously here, right? It's just a matter of wanting to have a little bit of autonomy, a little bit of way of managing my life, because if we can replace them with and put ourselves in their shoes, the idea of somebody controlling every aspect of our life is mentally exhausting, is very draining for an individual to expect here. And we really want to make sure that we can do as much as possible for them. So while we maintain this safety here, right, we think about ways of that meaning. What is safety to us? Safety can be something physical, where it's this, let's not run through the crosswalk. Let's make sure we have our seatbelt buckled, things of that nature, right? But it could also be internal safety, where it's maybe nutrition or mental exhaustion or masking and things like that. And we'll get to that point in just a little bit as well. But we determine that precursor that may indicate the child is going to be upset. Maybe math always sets this child off. How can we prevent the child from feeling overwhelmed or exhausted? Maybe we do antecedent interventions. Maybe we do choice making. Maybe we do assent practices. Things of that nature could all be very beneficial. Again, I'm going to say it over and over, this idea of autonomy and independence is going to be very significant for this child. If we can provide them with...
We do have some questions. Would you be
Oh,
willing to
sure.
take some questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, do you have any tips? Like, what if the child will not make a choice and they just shut down and won't communicate?
Right. And so that does happen when they do have this issue and they don't want to make a choice. So there's a couple of options here. So option A is that we usually think that we need to do it auditorily, right? We're going to say it to them and that should be enough. At times, though, it may be better to show them in picture form of these choices. Not necessarily saying it as a way of like, hey, you don't understand what I'm saying to you right now, so here are some pictures to make it easier. It's really just a matter of making them more comfortable. So you can do it where they just need to point to something instead of having them say it, because that's something that we unfortunately can't do as adults. We can't make the child say anything. And so having them be able to make a choice through that way is a possibility. Making it be maybe instead of a task-oriented kind of option, it could be a time-oriented item. So it could be, hey, we do need to do this, but do you want to work on it for 30 seconds or a minute before we give you a break? So those kind of options could be beneficial. I hope that's helpful.
And what if there's no option? You know, certain things you have to do, like getting shots at the doctor's office.
Right. And then that goes into it. That's a really good point, right? So that kind of situation is where we go into the antecedent type of interventions. So maybe a social story is told first. Maybe we provide an idea of what it's going to look like, what it may feel like, right? Don't give your child shots at home, but maybe you play doctor with them. Or maybe it's the idea of having some kind of reinforcement that they really, really like at the end of it, right? Maybe it could be, hey, you love ice cream, so you deprive them of ice cream for the entire week. And you say, hey, if we can get one shot, then we can get some ice cream afterwards. Like that kind of situation as well. You really want to make it as reinforcing as possible in order to make sure that the child feels that it's worth his time. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And then also, like you said, the making sure that you are anticipating the triggers and making things easier as you're going along. That's definitely a good choice. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. That's all the questions for
No,
now.
no, no, no. It's good. It's very good questions. And the same thing here, right? And I didn't put it in here because it's a little bit more on the professional end, but you really want to look at your child and determine if they are happy, relaxed, and engaged. So that's a very subjective term, but what that means is that you're looking to determine, are they willing to listen to you? Are they willing in this moment to listen? So an example here is if I tell a child, hey, come over here, but they're in the middle of having a tantrum, are they going to listen to me? Probably not, because they're really upset. But if the child is playing on the playground and they're just having a good time, and then I say, hey, come over here for a minute, and not taking away the playground, just wanting to see them, they are going to be more willing to do that as opposed to when they're angry at that time. So this is something that I wanted to spend a bit of time on too, is the idea that where does social media land here? How is social media playing an influence to what individuals on the spectrum are saying? I do fully believe that social media plays a role in how not just ABA is being looked at, but how autistic individuals as a whole are being looked at. One particular interest here is going to be masking and why does it matter? So the idea, and some of you may know about this and some of you may not, so we'll go ahead and explain it. Masking may be also called camouflaging or compensating. It's the idea that an autistic individual is putting on some level of a mask that allows that person to do well in society. It allows them to not hand flap, not throw a tantrum, not act in a certain way that in the past has caused them a lot of stress or concern or ill intent. And so they'll do that to be more successful in society. But the issue here is that without, and people are very happy about this, but the issue here is that people are not realizing that masking is possible to cause anxiety and depression. And what you're seeing here, these parentheses with the years, these are publications that have been released to the general public through medical and psychological journals that demonstrates this has been studied by other peers within the applied behavior analysis realm, if you will. You can look them up if you like, but it's more important just to show that we do have some sources that present this as well. Right. So the idea of mirroring may be something you have heard where they're trying to copy what other people are doing. They may do scripting where they're saying things from television and other settings that may or may not be appropriate. But more importantly, that masking can then cause dehumanization for these individuals on the spectrum, is that they're not willing to be themselves anymore because in the past it has been shown that people will not accept them for who they really are. And therefore, in order to be successful, there needs to be some kind of wall in between them and a neurotypical individual. So there's 3 different categories of autistic masking or camouflaging, if you will. So there's going to be the compensation, there's going to be masking as a whole, and then assimilation. So the compensation is that they may mimic different skills that they do in social time because they're lacking it. We say a lot of the times that individuals on the spectrum are lacking this social enigma of being able to get along with others. And so hearing that over and over is not going to feel very good. In order to encapsulate it further, they may look at people and copy that kind of personality, that kind of sociality in that way, and try and do their best to make friends because nobody really wants to be alone in that kind of situation. So that's compensation. But again, it can be very physically exhausting. I'm having to do it right now as I present, and that is very physically exhausting. And so with masking, it's this suppression of traits. I'm not hand flapping right now. I'm not rocking back and forth. Maybe I have an alternative stem right now, like I'm playing with my ring or I'm playing with this fidget here, but it's still the idea that I am not able, excuse me, to truly be myself in order to better promote myself in a way that others would be more accepting. And finally, the idea of assimilation is very significant because it just allows a person to observe and then try to fit in that way. An example of this for me has been having to see how people acted on a dance floor, seeing how people acted in middle school or high school, to then try to make friends in that way, to try and then make um, associations with people that would be more than willing to spend time with me. So the masking aspect of this is going to be very, very significant because through social media, unfortunately, even through misinformation, the wording of all of this is becoming really important in society because it allows us to better see how we should respond to those around us as well. So there's this insight here from the Awake Project, and they mentioned that there's a bucket of water. So much like everybody else here, when we have had push comes to shove, eventually we may explode, right? However, what is hopeful is that there is some kind of alternative that we can use in order to not explode, in order to not have, quote unquote, as the bottom right says, some kind of meltdown. The best way to go about this, though, is going to be to have some kind of aspect, material, activity that allows us to decrease this kind of mental stress that we are getting, right? For the autistic community, it may be like that child. Maybe the child is throwing those items, as I mentioned, to remove some of these buckets of water. It's possible that snack foods, stems, things of that nature are also allowing this child to decrease this kind of stress. I.e., an example of this is just stress relief through overeating is something that people do at times, right? So something to keep in mind there. So we have that everyday stress is already filling this bucket of water. Then we add in maybe a deadline at work. Then we add in a sick dog. Then we add PMS, other areas of this nature, right? Sensory overload and it overflows, and there's the meltdown. So you'll see again that it's not immediately a meltdown. There were things that happened in this individual's past that caused the meltdown to finally say, enough is enough. I need to be able to do this in order to relieve all of this pressure that has been inside me. But what we challenge instead is to try to allow the individuals with autism to have some kind of focus outside of their own realm to then better support themselves. A lot of the times, especially through masking, these individuals are not given an opportunity to find a outside force that can really better support them in that way. So the social media influence is very prevalent. It has impacted ABA, as you'll see on the right side, but it's also just impacted an autistic individual's way of believing in themselves. And I'll read some of these. I won't read all of these, right? But I don't mask because I want to be neurotypical. I mask because I have been punished and humiliated since I was a child because I'm not acting normal. Or the bottom right that says that she lost 2 jobs that she was fantastic at because she wasn't socially fit. A more anecdotal story is that I had a friend that was working phenomenally as a manager at a car sales company. But what they were doing at the car sales company is that they would have happy hours and they would go out to eat and have dinner and things like that after work. Well, this individual that was on the spectrum, that's a friend of mine, she had already spent her entire social range,
Mhm.
or
I've
whatever you.
heard people refer to it as like your social battery.
Yes, your social battery. She had already spent that at work because she was spending the entire day doing that. And when it came to her not going to the happy hour, being very reserved at the happy hour, she was fired at that point because she didn't fit in, despite the good job she was doing at work. She was doing what was asked of her, but something that was off the clock, that was not really in her control. She wasn't getting paid for it. She was still expected to act in a certain way. I went to a conference this weekend called Texaba that I was presenting at, and I loved going and I had a really great time. But I was incredibly exhausted because I had to spend the entire day like, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. I love seeing you and all of these things. And I really do. And they're my friends, right? But the idea of acting this certain way and not being maybe chill, more relaxed than I usually am caused me to get home. And I was just so exhausted. I just fell asleep for both of those days that I was there. And my wife, and I love my wife, was like, well, let's cuddle for a little bit before bed, or let's, have some kind of like physical time where like we're in each other's presence, if you will, right? But truthfully, I wanted to just go to bed because I just could not do it anymore. So in that kind of aspect, it's important to understand that um, masking is hard. It's hard for a lot of autistic individuals. And I put the last one, this ABA is abuse thing, to keep in mind that there are going to be people out there that are saying that ABA is a terrible thing. But what you'll notice here in this Twitter account is that she doesn't give an alternative for ABA. If ABA is so bad, you would think that that individual would try to provide an alternative solution, but there isn't one, right? There isn't one that is being given. I'm a board certified behavior analyst. It's important to also understand that ABA can be very significant to allowing a child be successful. And I'd love to speak to anybody about that, because it's really about how you're presenting your activities, whether it's through ABA, whether it's through some kind of therapy, or even in life, that this may happen to an individual. And it's very significant that we, again, work through that autonomy with that child. So this is just a message from an autistic individual. And you'll see that she said there were 9 things to know about autism. I think they're very important. I'm more than happy to allow you to read them. I took away number 8 because I personally don't believe that that was accurate. So I didn't want to give you guys inaccurate information. She said that autism is genetic. There's not a lot of information that says whether it is genetic. So I just didn't want to put that out there. It's just not a lot of research there, right? A lot of these are going to be definitely anecdotal things. But it's something, again, from an autistic individual, this is about how can we better support individuals on the spectrum. I thought this could be very, very significant for each of you. One thing in particular, right, that we think about is just because we sound monotone doesn't mean we are a set. I'll do another anecdotal story for each of you, where, again, I was at a couple of companies before I started my own company, and I was on performance plans for both of them. And for anyone that doesn't know, a performance plan is essentially almost a way of getting close to being terminated, or at least needing to find a different growth plan to better support you in your job. And regarding the reasons why I was on there, it was because socially I was just not doing well. I was not interacting as well as they would have liked with the employees. I was not implementing some kind of get together with the employees, because again, it was very, very exhausting to try and complete things like that. So thankfully now in my own company, I don't feel that way, because I'm doing it just because I really enjoy the people I'm around. I'm not necessarily having to do it anymore because it's an expectation, nor do I have any expectation for any of my staff to go to anything that are after hours without being paid, because of the fact that it's their life and I shouldn't judge them for how they may or may not feel regarding social time with individuals that are not either direct family members or direct friends in that way as well, right? So just something to keep in mind. I hope everyone was able to take a screenshot if they haven't already and they didn't think about that idea. I'll give you just a few seconds to get that. Otherwise, these slides are going to be given to you. Okay, awesome. So we'll keep moving on to that point. Absolutely. So how to de-escalate this confrontation, right? Is that the idea that there is quite a bit of controversy here. There is this idea that we're wanting to try and change, and there are people that are very interested in what autistic individuals have to say. But there are a lot of autistic individuals that are saying, well, why do you even ask that to begin with? How dare you ask something like that? And for me, again, as an autistic individual, the best way that we can learn is from each other. And the best way we do that is by asking questions. So despite what may be quote unquote unreasonable or inappropriate, I like to think that every question that's ever asked is just for the sake of trying to learn and educate ourselves in this way. And so that's something that I try to so please feel free to ask your questions as we continue on. We're just about done. But it's this idea that we can really do our best by providing opportunities to listen. The reason why I was at TechSaba, for an example, is that I was doing a neurodiverse panel where I was speaking on neurodiversity. And it was a really great time, but people were initially very scared to ask because they've had bad experience with autistic individuals shutting them down. But again, it's just really important for us to have to listen to one another. Listen to those asking the questions, but also listening to those that are in need, right? Maybe not shutting somebody down immediately that says, well, you don't know how hard I've had it, and blah, 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 and all of these things that they may do, right? But then maybe going into it and saying, well, how hard have you had it? What's happened in your life that made things very, very difficult for you? And being able to promote a dialogue in that way. There are plenty of people that come to me and say that ABA is the worst thing that has ever happened to them. ABA is the worst thing that you could do for a child. And I say, well, let's talk about it. Why do you feel that way? Because that idea didn't just come from nothing. That had to come from something. And in order to develop a more well-rounded approach, both for myself as well as for the individual I'm talking to, it can be very significant to have a conversation that can be developed through continual growth. And also believing in your child that they can be independent. Without my mother or my sister or my father, I would not have believed that I could accomplish what I have currently today. And they're still in my life, and I'm so very thankful for that. But you're always going to be your child's biggest support system. You're always going to be who that child thinks that they are. So an example here, right, is if that child is being spoon-fed throughout their life, and then we ask, oh, they can feed themselves, and the mother still spoon feeds them. This child is just going to believe, oh yeah, I can just spoon feed myself. I have no real desire to learn because I'm getting fed no matter what, so I might as well keep this going. So whatever you believe your child is able to do, that child is going to believe in themselves. And then finally, just ask yourself to like, did you do a good job for your child, or did you do a good job for somebody else, right? It's so significant to be there for your child. I think that any autistic individual would agree that as long as they have that person in their life that really cares about them or really is wanting them to succeed, then we will see immense progress in what the child is able to do. So that's my time right now. I'm more than willing to take on more questions, of course. The QR code goes to my website, so it's easier. You just take that picture. Or you can follow us on Instagram, AutismINTL. Visit our website, email me, call me. It doesn't really matter. We're on all of these things, and we're just so appreciative to have each of you here today. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. While I pull up the rest of my slides, I just have a couple more. I'm wondering if you could talk to us about characters that we've seen on television and in movies, and which ones you feel represent the most truthfully
Yeah,
in your opinion.
right.
We're all familiar probably with Sheldon. There was a great TV show called Atypical.
Yes.
The various things we've seen online. What do you feel about those, and what do you feel is good or misrepresenting you?
Right. So first thing I'm going to do right now is that I'm going to send you all a link to this individual. He's another autistic inventor, and he may be really good for you guys as well for the consolidated group.
Oh,
His name is
fantastic.
Jeff Snyder. He's in the northeastern region of the United States. I'm trying to find the Zoom. Excuse me, I lost you guys when I went back to the website. There it is. So his name is Jeff Snyder. This is his website, and he does a wonderful presentation on autism and Disney characters. And
Oh,
so I think, yeah, I think that could be a very beneficial individual to speak to. And in addition to that, right, I do agree. I think Atypical is a wonderful representation. I really enjoyed that show. The only thing I did not care for is the fact that the actual individual that is the star is not autistic himself. And so that's something to keep in mind. However, they heard the complaints, and I really enjoyed that. They heard the complaints, and they took season 2 and they added, I believe, 4, 5, 6 autistic individuals. And so that was really significant. And then they added, in addition, an autistic advisor to the show
oh,
to
fantastic.
better promote it. So I did think that was a really wonderful show. And it was also a good representation on siblings, which I think is a very significant aspect too. I would be nothing without my sister, and the same thing for that character in that show is that they had such a great give and take that
Mhm.
I thought was very, very significant in that way too.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that show. Thank you for speaking on that. So these are some of the other topics that we talk about a lot in the webinars that we do with Consolidated Planning Group. So I just wanted to, put that out there that we do these webinars 2, 3 times a week, sometimes even more, where we talk about just various aspects of planning for the future for your loved ones, benefits, ABLE accounts, special needs trusts, things that you need to keep on your radar and get set up correctly. If you're interested in seeing more of our webinars, you can go right here. This link will take you to our consolidatedplanninggroup.com website, where you can look at the events tab and sign up for any of our upcoming webinars. If you register, you will receive a link after the webinar is over. So even if you're not able to join us live, you can watch it later from our YouTube channel. Now, this is our entire team. This is the whole company, Consolidated Planning Group. We are not tied to any one large company. We're independent, which means that we can really find things that are going to help our clients the best, rather than trying to fit our clients into a small box of working with only one company. Allison and Jeff are the owners. They're a married couple. And then there's my glamour shot and my husband with the big beard. We also have 2 kids. They're 20 and 23. And we have a fantastic staff. Now, when you registered for this webinar, if you've registered for our webinars before, you know we will be reaching out to you. We reach out to everybody who registers for our webinars, just to see if you would like to schedule your free consultation. Or if you have any additional questions or any follow-up that you want, you get to chat with us. You get to pick our brains for free. So why not schedule your free consultation? We can answer any questions you have related to financial planning for the future, to benefits, SSI, SSDI, Medicaid, Medicare, all of that stuff, the state waiver programs. You can use the QR code to schedule your own consultation, or call us or email us, and then we won't bother you. But like I said, we're not trying to harass you. Please be polite and just say no, thank you if you're not interested, or better yet, go ahead and schedule your consultation. There are links down there to our YouTube channel where all of these webinars go, plus our Instagram, the podcast, and our Facebook page. So please follow us on social media too. We are always here if you have questions or concerns. We would love to get to know you and tell you how we work if you're interested. And let's see, I don't see any more questions, except will this be on our YouTube? Of course it will. So thank you all again so much for being here with us today. Armando, I love working with you and having webinars with you. You are such a good speaker, and I really appreciate you spending the time to be here with us today and giving us this fantastic presentation.
Absolutely. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, and have a great week. Bye-bye.